On this video, we're going to discuss the concept of racial identity versus cultural identity. Are you your color or are you your culture? I'm George Middleton, author of Beliefs Limiting Authentic Cultural Knowledge, a book that addresses the race construct from a mental health perspective. The premise being that if one chooses to identify by any color on the race construct, he or she may be operating on a racial belief system. Racial belief systems govern our thoughts, behaviors, and actions toward how we see ourselves and others. On my channel, Intellectual Honesty, I have been conducting a series of interviews designed out of my first activity in my workbook. The title being based on the question, are you your color or are you your culture? If you've never been asked that question, think about that for a moment and ponder what would your answer be. I am now going to show you a series of short interview clips on 3 of my participants. And I want you to note some consistency of thought process as they struggle to answer these questions.
So in answering that question, I would say it's a combination of both. In different situations, I feel like we have to understand our culture, how we fit in with others, how to relate when it comes to jobs, how it comes to just everyday conversations with people. When we talk about color, whether somebody calls us black, African American, what have you, it's still a perception of how we're looked at and the comfort level that we have to be at how others look at us.
Society doesn't really give you the option to choose. I think that society basically puts you in a color or in a category based on your color, but not the color you are, but the color you're not. The fact that you're not white and you're not Asian and you're not Latino is how, as black people and African Americans, that's how we identify ourselves. So I think we're grouped together by discrimination.
Do I see myself as a color or my culture, correct? Both. And I'll tell you why. I see myself, I have no choice but to see myself through the lenses that other people see me through. Because my day-to-day activities and or obstacles seem to be constructed around my color. So whether I buy into that or not, society around me does. And so I have a choice to participate in that or not. I can say organically, my first answer would be that I will probably lean towards culture versus color, because I strongly believe that my environment has made me who I am, and my environment is synonymous to culture to me, meaning rituals or traditions or things that make up black culture to me versus skin color, because some people may identify as black, some people may identify as African American, and some don't know the difference between the two, meaning black as a skin color, meaning you could be Jamaican, Haitian, African American, Senegalese, any type of minority. And a lot of people do not understand the differentiation between those things. So that's why I organically would lean towards culture versus color.
Very interesting. So let's look at Brian's response. Brian says, in answer to the question, a combination of both. It is a matter of how we fit in that chooses his answers to that question. It is a matter of perception in how others see us or look at us. Monty, he gets a little more direct in his thought process. He states that society doesn't give an option to choose, and that it treats you not on the color that you are, but the color that you're not. And then we have Deanna. Like Brian, she also stated both. She also stated she has no choice to see herself but through the lens of others. And then she further goes on to say that her day-to-day activities, struggles, and challenges are all constructed around her color. I find those a very interesting connection between these three unrelated responses. More importantly, there appears to be a significant lack of empowerment in deciding who they authentically are. Now keep in mind, when I do these activities, there are no right or wrong answers. They're purely designed for the participant to become conscious of their thought process. And it is hopefully through that process that they will decide on a conscious level and an intentional level to make choices that most perfectly align with who they really are. Now I want you to listen closely to their thought process on the next part of the question in this activity. How do they personally identify? Listen in.
Probably more as a black man. I think that's very important for us to understand where we come from. When people say African American, I think that just, my grandparents are from Jamaica, so I don't need to, tell people, hey, no, I'm not African American. It's that comfort level of just being, I'm black and being comfortable with that, and not have to all these subtitles that we have to be involved with. When I think about that, I still remember being in high school, and I remember at that time a lot of the kids that I went to school with, Pike was still a predominantly white school, and I remember I used to listen to WZPL quite a bit, and I remember my dad saying to me one day that it was okay to listen to that, but how often are you listening to WTLC and just really understanding who you are, and that's something that really hit home with me, because it was like, wow, here I am with these white guys that I was hanging out with, which was fun, and they were involving me in what they dealt with, but I wasn't bringing anything to the table to them. So that became super important to me to say, hey, as a black man, this is what I bring to the table.
I think the culture of being African American resonates with me more. Because if you look at black people, we span the spectrum, and we're put into a category all the way down to the lightest black person imaginable. And so I think in many of the people that I know, including myself, we don't look African, but here in America, I think that, we're pushed together, and I think that we need to band together, because if we don't, then, in those situations where where we are discriminated against and where there is a prejudice based on being non-white, I think we'll be put in a situation where there's just too much complicity. But trying to think of the word that I'm looking for. Basically, where people are complicit with what's going on when we're being discriminated against, and too many people who aren't willing to stand up, that we'll be left alone without a support group.
I would name my culture for lack of a better vocabulary, and because I have been conditioned by society, I would name my culture an African American culture, because I am, because of my genealogy and because of where I live. I can't say that I buy into all of the African American cultural stereotypes or what one may think of as an African American culture, but if I were to name it, that's what it would be.
Very intriguing. I find this work so interesting because I learn something new every time I conduct this activity. The way we process, the way we think is so unique in so many different aspects. So let's take Brian. He identifies as a black man. Why? He rejects the African American category out of convenience. It's just much easier to say black. It's a catch-all, so to speak, rather than having to delineate Jamaican heritage or African heritage. He feels it's much simpler to just say, I'm black. A very pragmatic approach. Deanna, she chooses African American. However, not necessarily because of a cultural resonation to it. She predicates her answer by saying, for lack of a better category. She just has to choose the label African American, although she doesn't necessarily buy in to the quote-unquote stereotypes associated with that. So it's not necessarily her comfort zone. Monty, however, stated very strongly that he resonates with his African American identification. He rejects the color of black because of the actual variation in skin tone amongst his community. So to summarize this second set of responses, it's interesting to note how there may be similarities in their answers, but total different meanings and intentions behind them. What I'd like to do now at this point is to include you all into this exercise. Yes, this is audience participation time. I want you to go to the comment section in this box and answer that question as best as you can, and give me some of your feedback on the answers you've heard, some of the analysis of them. I will then take your answers and feedback and include them in part 2 of an upcoming video. If you liked the content of this video today, please like and share with other like-minded individuals and encourage them to contribute information as well. Help me to build this community. And together, let's work to create an environment of intellectual honesty in discussing race and other important issues. If you would like to catch these interviews in their entirety, please feel free to visit this channel, thegeorgemiddleton.com, discover intellectual honesty, and review them at your leisure. Please leave your comments in the comment section and be part of this national discussion.